I spoke here the other time. Remember, yeah, it was clear.
Hello? Hi. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I cannot hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for our counterparts who are off the African continent. You're all welcome to this webinar where we're going to be looking at understanding member needs in the wake of disruption that is going to be facilitated by Jim Morell. And in this webinar, we'll be talking more about what kind of products do we offer our members and whether these products really get to speak to the member needs. And we need to keep into perspective that the members are being pursued by other SACCOs to get into their SACCOs. And the members also have very high expectations of what you're supposed to be doing as a SACCO for them. The members too are very volatile because there are so many other credit unions that are offering similar products as what we are doing. So as we get into this webinar, we'll be able to explore what strategies we can adopt in order to basically understand what the member needs are and speak to their needs, particularly now when we are looking at the challenges that financial institutions are facing, more so the SACCOs. For this webinar, we will have some housekeeping rules, and just for all of you to note, the webinar is being recorded and all participants have been muted. We encourage that you communicate throughout the presentation using the question section provided on your screen. For those using mobile phones, click on the question or question mark and then question mark icon or your screen type or queries. And for more information, please email us at info@ACCOSCA.org. This presentation, like I mentioned, is going to be done or presented by Jim Morell. And Jim has got 27 years. He has served in credit unions for 27 years and is the current CEO of the Peninsula Community Federal Credit Union, all the way in Washington State, USA. The credit union, that is Peninsula Credit Union, is a community development financial institution that promotes community development by serving individuals with moderate income, unbanked or underbanked households. Jim is a certified credit union development educator in the United States and in Africa, and the DE program enables him to pursue the use of the cooperative principles to help individuals build financial capability and communities to inspire economic economic development. So with that, I would like to welcome Jim. Jim, you're welcome.
Good morning and good afternoon to those of you in Africa. It's an early morning here. I am very excited to talk with you this morning about how we as credit unions, as SACCOs, can really understand members' needs and respond to their needs, particularly in times of crisis when they need us the most. So thank you again for having me. Thank you to ACCOSCA. This is a very special treat to start off my day here in the U.S. And if you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. One more. There we go. I wanted to give everybody kind of a lay of the land and to show you that there's a different Washington in the United States. Washington State is on the left side of the U.S., way up in the upper left-hand corner there, and the blue dot is where I sit here today in the afternoon for many of you in Africa, and very early here in the morning in Washington State. So I live in a small town called Shelton. We have about 10,000 people that live in our town here, and we'll go ahead and move on to share a little bit more about me. On the next slide, you'll see who I am. I'm just another guy that kisses giraffes. This is a picture from my very first trip to Africa in 2014 when I was in Kenya, and have enjoyed every one of my trips, not only meeting creatures like Joke here, the giraffe, but also meeting many, many friends across the continent when I've traveled to Rwanda and Zimbabwe, and then most recently a year ago to Kenya and Zanzibar and Tanzania. I was supposed to have traveled last month to Ghana, which would have been my first trip to Western Africa. And unfortunately, due to COVID, of course, I was not able to make that trip, but I very much look forward to visiting Ghana here in the near future. My trips to Africa have very much inspired me. The friends of mine that are on this call and many that I will meet in the future, you have inspired me to work harder for my members here in Shelton and in Washington State to help improve their financial lives, just as you're improving the financial livelihood of many of your members of your SACCOs. So it's with fond memories of my visits that I bring to you information this morning about how we can respond to members in the wake of many disruptions that are going on in this world. Next slide, please. So I believe that in order for us to be able to best respond to times that have disruption, we really have to first know ourselves, and we must understand who we are and what we stand for as credit unions, what makes us different. And that begins, of course, with our cooperative principles and our values. Next slide, John. So much of this many of you already know, but a cooperative financial institution owned and controlled by our members who use its services. We do not exist as SACCOs without our members who are elected to lead us and provide a strategic direction for where we're going. We're not-for-profit organizations. We do not exist to make money for stockholders, shareholders. We exist to provide a safe and convenient place for members to save money and to get loans at reasonable rates. Credit unions serve groups that share something in common, such as a community, or perhaps an employer or an affiliation, such as a cooperative or a group of farmers. We all have a common bond that brings us together, our members, and with that in mind, we then rely on our operating principles to navigate for us. So the next slide. The 7 cooperative operating principles are things that I fall back on whenever faced with a challenging situation. We are just releasing tomorrow a newsletter, and I'd be happy to provide this to you. For those of you that can see my screen, I wasn't able to release this just yet, but in this newsletter article that I wrote, I talk about these cooperative operating principles, particularly how they apply in the light of not only COVID, but for those of us here in the United States and around the world, the racial and economic inequalities that exist, the tension that exists here after the death of George Floyd, and other challenges of the Hispanic and Asian American communities and the Native American communities. These cooperative operating principles motivated me, along with the help of the National Credit Union Foundation and Chad Halmanack there, to interpret some of the operating principles in this manner. Voluntary and open membership. We do not discriminate in who we hire or who we serve. It's our goal as SACCOs to have financial stability of all people. That's important all the time. So anyone within our common bond can join without fear of discrimination. The second, democratic member control. All of us as credit unions elect a board of directors. At Peninsula Credit Union, an example of how this lives out in today's world is that my board of directors has expressed interest in increasing diversity of thought and experience, as well as ethnic and age diversity on the board. It's with these different perspectives that we're better equipped to approach not only how and what direction to take our SACCO in the future, but also to respond to different things that happen in our economy or different things that happen in our environment. And the beauty of the democratic control for credit unions is that each member has just one vote. It's the same as the next member. The third, member economic participation. It's very important that not only members participate, but also that the net income is used by the credit union to build capital reserves. It's that capital that's there that can be built during good times, but also can be used during bad times. So I'll speak about that a little later on. Autonomy and independence. It's our primary interest for our members to make decisions based upon the well-being of our members and our team that supports them and supports those members all the time. The fifth one I feel incredibly strongly about. Every day in every transaction, we are about educating our members to improve their financial lives. And we can only do that when we empathetically listen to what is going on in those members' lives. Otherwise, we will miss the mark. So we have to understand who our members are and what motivates them. Otherwise, we will not achieve our goals of member economic participation and the other principles that I've reviewed. Cooperation amongst cooperatives. There is no better time than during a disruption for credit unions to work together and to seek out community partners who you can work with in order to support the community. Which leads us to the seventh operating principle in concern for the community and seeking out opportunities to provide optimism, not only for your members, but as your SACCO leads your community into a better and a more positive future. So the cooperative operating principles, to summarize, is how we move forward and tie all of our understandings of our members and our response as a SACCO or credit union going forward. Next slide, please. We also have these values that are based on those cooperative principles. The value of self-help, members' self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, solidarity. It's in the tradition of our founders and cooperative members that we believe in the ethical value of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. Next slide. I often, in our credit union, refer to our triple bottom line benefit. And so I'd like to explain first a little bit more about Peninsula Credit Union and who Peninsula Credit Union is, and then talk about the triple bottom line benefit. the secret sauce, as I like to call it. So next slide. So Peninsula Credit Union, we were started in 1935 by 7 members, 7 men that worked for a pulp and paper company. And today we call that credit union Peninsula Credit Union. At that time, there's $35 in assets. Today we have over $220 million in assets and just over 20,000 members. Our net capital is 8.73%. For us here in the United States, we're considered a well-capitalized credit union at 6%. I know those ratios are different in different places. This is the way our ratio is calculated. We have 5 branches and 70 people, team members that are working on behalf of our members, 7 democratically elected board members, and 4 supervisory or audit committee members at the credit union. Next slide. Our vision at Peninsula Credit Union is to be recognized as being about more than money. So it's not just the money that motivates us, but what happens with that money, both for our members, for the credit union, and for the community. We listen, we serve, we educate, we care, and we do that all the time, every day, every interactions with one another inside the organization, as well as every interaction with our members outside the organization. In 2014, our board of directors also approved a longer mission statement that was focused on community development. And the importance of this mission statement to us has become the recognition that we're dedicated to promoting community development, whether that is for people of low to moderate income or wealthy people, people that do not have banking relationships or may have very limited underbanked relationships. By listening to people, serving their financial needs with affordable financial services, educating to create a personal development plan, we work to demonstrate our care to enrich their lives and helping to achieve financial stability always. So the key components of that, again, are that we're really focused on households that are living at or below a household survival budget, people that are making money only enough to pay for their shelter and for their food, for their utilities, for their basic needs. That is members who earn just enough or less to pay for basic monthly expenses. Next slide. So the triple bottom line benefit, the secret sauce, has 3 parts. Obviously, triple means 3. The first is benefits of our members' financial lives. In order to do that, we must understand our members' needs. The second is benefits to the communities we serve, as these efforts result in economic development. The stronger we can help our members become financially as individuals and their households, the stronger and more vibrant the community is, because they will purchase and support the community financially as well. And third, benefit to the credit union's financial bottom line. When the net income is negative, we can stabilize the credit union with capital to ensure that the credit union is safe and sound. But we can't do that, obviously, all the time. We have to focus most of the time on net income being positive so that we build that capital, so that the capital reserves are there to stabilize the credit union when we go through a disruption. So these 3 bottom lines, the member, the communities, and the credit union, are the 3 triple bottom line secret sauce benefits. We were certified and recognized by what's called the Community Development Financial Institution certification from the U.S. Treasury in 2013. And we did that not only because we said we subscribe to these 3 bottom line benefits, but because we actually live these out. So let me explain a little bit further on the next slide on how this works together. Many of you, and I know that all of you who have been through the DE program, the Africa DE program or others, know the onion. And at the center of that always is the member. Members make up our SACCOs. SACCOs within a country make up the apex organization, and those apex organizations work together with ACCOSCA and ACCOSCA with WOCU to make our entire credit union landscape stronger by educating one another, by listening to each other, so that we can accomplish these goals of understanding who we are as credit unions and how we benefit the center of that onion, the member. If you go on to the next slide, the member is also at the center of community economic development. Our SACCO members make up families. Those families create communities, whether they be towns or cities or villages or countries as a nation, and globally, all of those nations create, of course, the world, but it all starts out with the member. If the member is able to do better financially, then we too are able to benefit the communities that we serve in. And one more slice of this onion that we can take a look at on the next slide is how the member relates to work, to jobs, whether that's farming or working for a police force or working for any other type of organization. Our members comprise companies. Those companies comprise an industry, maybe it's a power industry, and those industries generate the local economy, which then leads into the national GDP or the national economy. But again, you'll note that at the middle of all of this, in all three cases, it begins with an individual. It begins with that person, that member of our SACCO that we are trying to focus on and financially benefit. So to put it all together on the next slide, this is what we call the triple bottom line benefit: the member, community economic development, and the SACCO. And a special shout out to my friend Marjorie, who's representing the member, and my friends at Kenya Police SACCO, who are representing in this slide the SACCO, and all of us in the middle there are representing community economic development. Next slide, please. So how does this all benefit our community? Well, it supports the credit union mission to serve working class people with moderate income, people of modest means, by helping them obtain and keep jobs. And in this way, they individually support economic development by spending what they make. So again, that's the financial benefit for the member that leads into the community benefit, and ultimately, by producing net income for the credit union, builds capital reserves to make the credit union strong to weather any type of circumstance that might be ahead of us. In our field of membership, we have roughly 10 to 15% of the population that is unbanked, that has no banking relationship. 17% of our residents live in poverty. 38% in the county where I live are at a minimum cost of living or below. Now, these numbers may be surprising to some, but this is the reality, and this is the community that Peninsula Credit Union has gotten to know. The unemployment figures there are a little bit dated. They were a bit better prior to COVID, but now all of the unemployment is well into the double digits, between 15 to 20%, because people have been put out of work due to needing to stay home in order to stay healthy. So most banks and credit unions will not lend to people with low credit scores or poor credit. And the focus that we have are on all of these bullets: people living in poverty, helping people to become banked, lending to people with poor or little credit history, no prior experience borrowing money from financial institutions. And we help them understand what that means and what their responsibilities are. That self-accountability that we mentioned is one of the values in order for us to do our work. So that's a snapshot of who Peninsula Credit Union is and our triple bottom line benefit. And you move on to the next slide, we'll begin to talk a little bit more about knowing our members. So we've seen on the onion that we are all part of this world that creates co-ops and credit unions right down to the individual member. And it's important that we know our members and we understand them with empathy. So the empathy process, and this is something that if you have not done this, I would encourage you to do this as part of your board or part of your SACCO's understanding of your members, to really think and feel or think about what your members are thinking and feeling. What really matters the most to your members? What are their worries? What do they aspire to? What do they want to accomplish in life? And then also think about what they see. What are they witnessing in the streets and the town where they live? What's in their environment? What do they hear in the news or read about? What are people talking about? What do they hear friends saying? What are family members saying? Both their children or their grandparents or their parents? What are their bosses and peers saying about what is taking place in the world around them? And what are they saying, the member saying? What is the member saying and doing? How do they appear? What's their attitude? Are they upbeat and optimistic all the time? Or are they doom and gloom because of what is taking place? When we begin to answer these questions or think about these questions from our members' perspective about what are they thinking and feeling every day, what are they saying and doing or hearing and seeing, we begin to understand not only their pains, what might they be fearful of or frustrated about, what obstacles stand in their way, but also their gains. What are their wants and needs? How do they measure success? And what might their goals be? It's much easier to do this when there's not disruption, such as COVID going on, when there's not an economic turmoil that's taking place. But we can practice this also during a disruptive event, such as COVID-19, and do the same exercise again with our members. And when we begin to think about what our members are experiencing, then we can learn to better understand them. To take this exercise one step further on the next slide, you can do this very simply with a blank piece of paper. And Rafa, the individual in the middle here, this is an experience that your board or your staff can pursue of thinking of what Rafa is saying and doing, thinking and feeling. And you begin to then put together or help identify themes that might help Rafa in his life. Themes that the credit union might be able to best identify. There are also many things that Rafa is feeling or saying or doing or thinking that are outside of those themes that maybe the credit union is not the best organization to help support. As an example here at Peninsula Credit Union, the financial challenges that some of our members face are a byproduct of mental health challenges or issues. Peninsula Credit Union does not provide mental health services. We can refer people to mental health service providers, but that is not our expertise. Our expertise is around the financial livelihood of our members and improving that aspect of Rafa's life. But this is an exercise that your boards or staff can do in this empathy mapping in order to help better understand what your member might benefit from you providing. Another option on the next slide is to actually ask, yes, to go to your member as First Financial Federal Credit Union did in Baltimore, and ask your member some very simple questions. When we do surveys, sometimes we think that they need to be overly complex. As this example from First Financial shows, there's really 4 questions and you check boxes. The first is, are you a member of the credit union? Yes or no? Or as they put it, you bet or not yet. So you can make the questions kind of fun. How are you feeling about your financial outlook? I already found my rainbow and I'm doing great. I've weathered the storm but nervous about what the future holds, or I need help making it through. So you can see just by the terminology, it's a kind of a fun way to answer questions. And also then identify, the third question is, what are you struggling with? And they can check the boxes, whether that's saving for emergencies or planning for the future or managing debt or having enough to cover expenses. And finally, I'd like to learn more about how to obtain an emergency loan or financial counseling. You would need to, of course, adjust these questions to your SACCO and your environment because you know that the best. But this is an example of a sort of bright, as it identifies at the top, rainbow after every storm of financial wellness. And with this information, this can help you identify the opportunities that your SACCO has to benefit your members. This might be an activity that you could do in a newsletter and ask people to respond back to you. You could do it at an annual general meeting as a part of an activity there, or you could ask members to complete the survey if they come to you to do transactions. Many different ways to do this type of needs assessment or survey. And so the last question about what they'd like to learn more about is your welcome, Matt. It's them opening the door to you as to what they want to know. And then finally, at the end, how do you contact them so that when you set up that class, you can reach out to them and say, hey, we're now offering some information about emergency loans. We thought you might be interested, and they, of course, would say yes. These types of empathy mapping and needs assessments are more formal ways. One of the best ways that I've found to understand members is simply to have a conversation. Let me go to the next slide. I had a conversation with this board of directors at Mukuvisi SACCO in Harare, Zimbabwe in 2016. My friend Marjorie took me there, and you can see that they do have a woman on their board, which brings diversity, and I was learning more about the environment with which they were in, what created their common bond. Each one of these individuals is the owner of a cooperative making different things. And we had a conversation about what motivated them to form this SACCO, to create this. And it was formed to help people learn to save a little bit of money. It was formed so that that savings could be then used for burial expenses when a member of the family passed away. And it was formed so that savings could be used for their children. As we sat in their boardroom, listening to what was going on outside, we heard the vibrant sounds of people making things and building things, the productivity that would lead to some profit from their businesses, from the cooperative businesses. And that money, then a little bit, they were trying to educate and encourage people to save in the SACCO. It was difficult in 2016. It is extremely difficult for Mukuvisi SACCO now in the wake of COVID with the economic impact to save money. But these board members had the conversation with me and very vividly painted the motivation of why they exist as a SACCO and who they were trying to benefit. And we began to strategize about how they could go about doing that, how they could encourage more people to save money. On the next slide, I always like to show this because some of the goods that they were producing were just incredible furniture and cabinetry, well pump equipment, and paint supplies. It was a really beautiful part of the world that I got to visit, and most importantly, and motivated me to come back home with the inspiration that every one of us has an opportunity to understand our members and to serve them through our SACCO. One other quick story from another credit union in Harare is on the next slide. The municipality of Harare Savings and Credit Cooperative Society. The municipality of Harare SACCO was another board that I met with and supporting the municipality workers in Harare. And on the next slide, what I really wanted to point out to you is that their focus was depicted for me in this slide, which identified the different types of loans that they had. The largest segment was around building loans, the second around residential stands, and the third around loans for school fees. So I could tell just in this snapshot, if you're more of a numbers person, just by this snapshot, the three most important areas of focus for their credit union that they had identified would benefit their members the most. So I appreciate those visits and all of the others that I've had across Africa as well. The next slide. So we've talked a lot about who we are. We've talked a lot about empathy mapping and understanding who our members are. Now, what do we do with what we know? And that's what we'll spend the remainder of the time talking about. On the next slide, there's some action steps that we can think about. The first is to be proactive. As SACCOs, when you're motivated to benefit members, particularly during times of economic or health disruption or any other type of disruption, you cannot sit on the sidelines. We are obligated as cooperators to be proactive about what we do. We also need to be relevant, and we've talked about ways that we can identify for our members how we can be relevant. And we cannot continue to do the same old thing. We cannot continue to not adjust our ways or to improve. We always have to work at becoming or at remaining relevant. We have to be welcoming. If we're not welcoming, then it's not open and voluntary membership, it's closed and dying membership. So we have to welcome more and more people into our SACCO all the time. And we have to be memorable. We have a phrase here in the US called suggesting that you do not want to be a wallflower. You don't want to just blend into the woodwork. You want to stand out and be meaningful, and you can be meaningful by taking the last action step of educating people. I appreciate my friend Julie Ferguson, who very succinctly put these action steps together for how we can advance our SACCOs and how we can respond in the wake of disruption by being proactive, relevant, welcoming, memorable, and educating people. At Peninsula Credit Union, this is a list of products and services. I won't go into depth on each one of these, but I will, on the next slide, highlight a couple of them. But as we've gotten to know our members, we have different types of checking accounts for individuals who may not have had much of or ever had a checking account before, or a savings account even, or any type of account, and we call that Renew. Save to Win and Borrow to Save, I'll talk more about in a moment. We have what we call a money checkup. It kind of is a quick assessment of somebody's financial health. We do financial counseling. 100% all of our staff at all levels of our organization are certified financial counselors, or if they're not certified yet, they're in the process of becoming certified. We offer financial education classes. We put together fairs on Saturdays with financial information, not only just from ourselves, but from other members of the community, healthcare providers, different types of other agencies and organizations that can help people's livelihood. And you can see that we have various different types of loans, and I'll talk about the one called the LIFT loan more in a second. I think that might be of help for many of the African SACCOs as well. So on the next slide, I wanted to share with you something called prize-linked savings. And prize-linked savings is, we call that on the prior slide, Save to Win. This was actually an account that was developed in South Africa in the early 2000s. And what they tried out in South Africa was how would incentives help encourage people to save money? If we gave them opportunities to win, like in a lottery or lotto, would they save more money? So prize-linked savings are typical savings products that are offered to participants with the chance to win. And for every, in our case, $25 a month that somebody deposits into their prize-linked savings, they get entered into a drawing. And then every quarter and every year, actually every month, quarter, and year, there's prize drawings that are provided to those people that are participating in this account. So the more times you make a $25 deposit each month, the more entries you have, the greater your chances are to win. And that incentive then begins to change people's behavior and encourage them to save money. And pretty soon they're saving money without thinking about it. But they always have an opportunity to win. And the prizes are not large. I believe the prizes are also $25, $50 on the quarter, and maybe $100 for the year. So it's not thousands and thousands of dollars, not to mislead, but it's enough to change people's behavior. On the next slide, there's another type of some other examples of products that we offer. The Borrow and Save account is an account we have where somebody can borrow a small amount of money, and every month when they make a loan payment, a small portion of that payment gets moved into a savings account for them. So the payment is covering the payment of principal and interest, plus a little bit moved off into the savings. But the interest rate is no higher, it's actually lower. We're using a portion of the interest to encourage people to move that money into savings. The LIFT loan stands for Lower Interest for Timely Payments. And this could apply to any type of loan. We happen to apply it to automobile loans or car loans, but you could use any type of loan. And what this product does is that as people make their loan payments on time, if they do that over the course of 1 year, 12 months, we automatically decrease their interest rate by 1%. If they do it for a second year, the next 12 months, months 13 through 24, we decrease their interest rate by 1 more percent. And we do that up to 3 years, as long as the member has made their payments on a timely fashion. What we're encouraging here, of course, is for people to prioritize their loan payment to the credit union, and we reward them by decreasing their interest rate without them having to ask. Finally, I mentioned this before, but financial counseling is provided both with our staff working directly with members, as well as through education programs and classes that we teach. And we also remind our staff that these same tools that they have in their toolkit to help members, they also can use for themselves and for their family. So I think that's really important, and we've only begun to sort of have that aha moment in the last couple of years to say, we're helping all of our members. We also want to make sure that we're using these tools to help our staff. In the next slide, we are a part of our community, and there is cooperation amongst cooperatives and other credit unions, but also with other community partners. These are just by title, but you'll see in this title school districts. So we have programs where we work with the schools to do financial reality fairs, very simple programs to help teach kids about money and the importance of saving and how they can wisely spend money. We have a Lemonade Day that we do in the schools, which is helping elementary school children understand if you make lemonade, you can sell that. And if you do a little bit of marketing, perhaps hang a sign to let people know that you are selling lemonade, you can sell more lemonade. So it begins to give the children an idea of what it is to run a small business. We also do many programs with other credit unions and banks through asset building coalitions and efforts called Bank On, which that is to say financial education programs in the community. We teach those through the libraries and through these different organizations. So we seek out credit union partnerships where we can go out as a credit union or work with others in order to do more financial counseling and financial education rather than simply waiting for people to come to us. So if we move on to the next slide, let's begin to talk a bit about the impact let's pass that slide. Forgot to take that one out. Let's start to talk about the impact of a disruption. We already know each other and what to do, the impact of a disruption, and all of us are now addressing the concerns related to COVID-19. We also have natural disasters, whether that's weather or drought, that occur. There's many, many different types of disruptions. We're best equipped to handle those disruptions, as I said before, if we've done all of this pre-homework. But if we haven't, that doesn't mean that we're dead in the water. That means that we have more tools and resources to be able to help us to act. Now, on the next slide, we'll start to talk about some of those actions. We act with empathy through the lens of our members. We can confirm member needs by directly asking members, or when our staff interacts with members. That is the front line that can provide us a lot of information about what's going on in members' lives. Those conversations that our staff might have with our members when they're doing their transactions, their deposits, or making their loan payments, or opening up accounts. Utilize that information that comes from your people that work at the SACCO or yourselves in order to strengthen your understanding or your empathy about what your members are experiencing right now. And encourage dialogue with members. When there's a disruptive event that happens, and typically we think of what happens with people's finances, the thing that we say first is, please, if you're a member of a credit union or a customer of any type of financial institution, please let us know that there's an issue. The sooner that we can talk to the member, the more the credit union will be able to make arrangements to help avert or help lessen the financial impact, not only on the member, but also on the credit union and also on the community. I was speaking with a friend of mine recently in Rwanda. He was a waiter at a hotel in Rwanda. And since March, he's been out of work, unable to go to the hotel and work, and that hotel may not be open until September. He also plants maize, I believe it is, in some fields. They were not able to go out and do that. He shared with me how other businesses were impacted and how workers and members were without pay, and how prices were being pushed up at the grocery where buying food and supplies. So higher prices and no pay, recipe for disaster, right, for Bernard's life. But we talked about what little he could put together for savings, and I think he has stabilized things now for his family. And it took some conversation, and it took some encouragement to say, you can make it through this. Sometimes it's as much encouraging people as it is providing them financial resources in order to help them understand that they can succeed. But we only get there if we empathize with their situation, like Bernard's situation in Rwanda, and we confirm their needs, and then we start talking with them about what they can do, what we can do with them, alongside them. So on the next slide, there's some of those tips about the credit union providing proactively, spend things wisely, borrow only when necessary. You can help members to understand that the credit union is what is available through the credit union for products and services, and you can help them understand that savings helps them plan for tomorrow. The next slide is what happens if the credit union is unable to help. The credit union, for us, we're always able to help, but we're not able to help when members have previously created us a loss. So if a member of Peninsula Credit Union previously had a loan and did not pay on that loan during a disruptive event, we're not going to be able to extend to that member the same benefits as what we can other members who did not previously create a loss. Members who are delinquent prior to the event happening, prior to the disruption occurring, we are also not able to provide the benefits to them. these may sound harsh. These are actually our pre-existing policies that were put in place prior to the disruption, and they are also the regulatory guidance that we have. So our regulator in the United States, one more thing on that, the regulator in the United States said that, you know, we will give you great latitude to be able to work with members if they have lost their job or lost their income due to COVID. However, that's only if they are current on their existing loans, that they have not created a loss for you, and that they're not more than, and that was the case prior to the COVID event happening. So it's not just us being sort of grouchy people at the credit union or trying to play favoritism towards anybody. We have educated people in advance prior to a disruptive event like COVID happening that you need to pay your loans on time. And we work with people to understand the benefits that they get from that then, as well as if things are not so good. So please move on to the next slide. So the COVID-19 impact on credit unions and operational response only works on the next slide as it says if credit unions are considered essential. And we have been considered essential as financial services, meaning that we have not closed. We continue operating and have throughout the crisis for now, in our case of Peninsula, 4 full months. That we have limited access to our branches by appointment only, and we've moved pretty much all of our services, the way we provide services, to remote types of access. It's essential for underserved communities to continue to have credit unions, and we have learned how to be very, very flexible in order to allow effective operations. By doing this, by continuing to be able to be there for our members, we've helped stabilize households financially by ensuring their basic needs have been met. On the next slide, the member-facing relief that we've provided to people includes things like loan restructuring. And by that, what I mean is allowing people to defer their loan payment for up to 3 months, or reducing their payment to interest only. So they're only making an interest payment, but they're not paying down principal. That option is an option that has tremendously benefited our members. They have greatly appreciated only needing to pay the interest on the loan for a period of 3 to 6 months. And it also helps the credit union because the interest that's being paid is interest income for the credit union. So it's benefiting our income as well as benefiting the member by saving them a large portion of their payment for several months. Debt consolidation, combining different debts or loans for our members has been something that we have done a lot of, maybe combining that various loans together at a lower interest rate. We've provided advances, small cash advances at a low interest rate. We have waived fees. We have also provided different insurance types of services for our members. So these are some of the examples. And if you would like to see more, you can go to our website, pcfcu.org, Peninsula Community Federal Credit Union.org. At the top, there's a banner that says COVID-19, and you can go to that page and see all of the different education resources as well as the various member-facing relief items that we have. Continuing on to the next slide, there's additional member-facing relief measures that we have in providing financial counseling. We've provided information and advice about scams, email scams, and other types of ways that the bad guys are trying to rip off our members. We also take that information, the scam guidance, and issue that to our local media, to our newspapers and our radio to share. And we've provided health information or links to organizations and government resources that are providing health information. I mentioned this before, but it's also very important to note to not forget to remind your directors and your staff that they might benefit from all of the same information that you're providing to your members. Sometimes, again, it's easy for us to forget that we can be recipients or beneficiaries of the credit union's products and services during a time of crisis or any time. On the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial impact of disruption. At Peninsula, we are seeing fewer loans provided by members. So if you say, for instance, that you have 25% fewer loans that you're providing to members, that could lead to, in our case, we're forecasting a 60% reduction in net income for 2020. And then further on in the long term in 2021, the decrease of interest income this year will lead into next year and may lead to a decrease of capital if we're unable to keep our net income positive. I've shared with my board of directors that there's no better time than, or rather say it differently, when you're going through a disruptive event like COVID-19, that is the purpose for having capital. That is the purpose of having those reserves. We may need to utilize some of that capital if we're unable to continue to generate positive net income. But so far, it looks like, well, we'll have a very severe impact to our net income. Like I said, 60% reduction this year. We'll continue to remain positive net income and adding just a little bit more to our capital. But overall, over the long term, if the loans that we're issuing to members are not sustained, that will have a long-term impact to the net income. On the next slide, this is going to be very difficult to read, but I wanted to provide it to those, maybe let's see, is that, oh, sorry, I forgot about this one. Increased demand for cash. You might anticipate that people are going to be requesting more cash from you because they have that need. So if they have some money in savings, they may be withdrawing more. One thing important to note down at the bottom of this slide is to communicate with your regulators. It's been impressed upon us that it's always good to have an open dialogue with the regulators, both in good times as well as bad times. It's much easier to build trust during good times and then rely on that trust relationship with your regulators during challenging times if you wind up in challenging financial situations as a SACCO. And we can move on to the next slide. I would very much encourage all of you, and this may be the case for some, but not everyone, to pursue capacity-based lending, not share-based lending. Capacity-based lending is what will best help support your members' ability to pay when they take out a loan from your SACCO. If members are not employed, they will have fewer shares to collateralize against the loan. And so we really have to look at what is their ability to repay that loan. I'd encourage you to forecast what is happening today on the future. Whatever your original 2020 budget is, probably needs to be revised, or at least to reforecast what your reality might look like. And relative to the disruption, you may need to make decisions quickly. The sooner you make adjustments, the sooner you can pursue your new or altered course. If you spend a lot of too much time discussing the matter over and over again and never reach a decision and never adjust your course, you could wind up, as they say, down the river without a paddle pretty quickly. So I would encourage you to have these discussions, to reforecast and look at what your financial situation is going to look like down the road. What this brings us back to is the triple bottom line benefit. remember that all of this direction, oh, there it is. Sorry, a couple of slides get misorganized here for me. I did add this spreadsheet in here real quickly just because sometimes there's people that are very numbers oriented, and you can spend more time with this. It's very difficult to read on the slide, but essentially this is an exercise that looks at the SACCO's assets that you have. It looks at your net worth or your capital, and it determines how much of that net worth or capital is available for making emergency loans during a crisis. And you leverage that amount into the amount of emergency loans that you can grant. And I'd be happy to have a dialogue or to talk with people more about how this spreadsheet works, but I wanted to provide that tool, and you can study that and get back to me with questions either here in a moment or later on. Next slide. So all of what we've talked about is very much the credit union difference. As Frederick Reifeson said, money alone will improve nothing. Much more important is education and the purposeful use of funds made available by credit unions to bring about improved conditions. You may have noted that what I've talked about is not only financial, but it's also the importance of education. It's also the importance of our 7 cooperative operating principles, empathizing with our member situation in order to identify the best products and services and ways the credit unions can support our members, not only during good times, but also during disruptive times like this COVID-19 event. Next slide. On the following slide here, there are a couple of resources that I've provided. The Filing and Research Institute. There's one more slide after this, I think. The Filing and Research Institute has provided a report. They do research for the credit union industry, not only in the U.S., but around the world. Enhance the financial well-being of members and employees, and that resource link is there. And then also the World Council of Credit Unions, a document for the COVID-19 guide for credit unions, regulator and operational responses might be helpful and useful for all of you. And the final slide brings us to an opportunity to, I think, have time for questions and answers. And I very much appreciate your listening and look forward to talking more with you.
Thank you, Jim, for that presentation. I believe the number of highlights that you've pointed out that are still applicable to the SACCOs in Africa. And at this point, I would like to open up for questions. If you have any questions, please send the chat through the question mark icon if you're using your phone, or through the chat directly if you're using your laptops. If you have any questions, and in the meantime, Maureen, please, let's have the poll questions. We have a couple of poll questions, and the first is, my SACCO often engages members through. Kindly select one of the options given, or select one that is social media, through the phone or SMS, e-newsletter, annual general meeting, member experience surveys. My SACCO often engages members through. Please respond, select one of the options that are given below: social media, SMS or phone, e-newsletter, annual general meeting, member experience surveys. This out. Oops. Can you hide it? Look at this. Okay, thank you, Maureen, for that. Yeah, we are seeing that most of the members are engaged through social media, And then we also have the SMS standing at 22%, e-newsletter at 4%, annual general meeting at 30% again, which is a tie with the social media. And then we have member experience surveys at 13%. And my comment on this is it is important for us to use the social media for engagement with our members because of this flexibility and ease of reaching out to our members. And I'm glad that we all share the same, nearly the same views, or most of us selected that as our key primary way of engaging with our members. But I also see this tied with the annual general meeting, 30%. And I know the annual general meeting is usually held once a year. And if we are to wait for the annual general meeting so that we get to engage our members, that could be a downside on our side, particularly for the SACCOs. If the information flow comes once a year at the AGM, that might not be sufficient, but more information again has got to be shared in between the annual general meetings. And when it comes to the SMS and the phone, or using the phone, this scored 22%, and of course we know the penetration for most of at least the African continent, people use mobile phones, so this is still a very effective tool of engaging the members, say even if it's through a survey or through finding out what the members need, or any communication or any information that you may require from your member. The phone is one key element that can be used for communication. The newsletter, to some extent, yes, it can be used, though, of course, usually newsletters are periodic. So depending on how often these letters are cascaded to the members, then the information may be delayed for the members to know about what new products you're having, or what new changes you want to implement, or what other information needs you might need from the members, or just maybe for information purposes about the welfare of the SACCO. So it comes to member experience surveys. These are also an important aspect for information sharing or engaging members. We're able to know, when you do member experience surveys, we're able to know what the members are experiencing, what the members want, and that makes us gives us more privilege to respond to the members' needs appropriately. So I think these were very good responses, and it puts into perspective what our views are about member engagement in the SACCOs. And of course, this is not the first time we are seeing the AGM coming up as the key major way of engaging with the members. It is, I don't repute, the only downside with it is it might not be sufficient. The fact that it's held once a year, and of course, the entire time there's a lot of information and engagement that needs to go on with the members. Maureen, next poll question. So in this disruption, this is the next question. In this disruption, we have responded to our member needs through, kindly select one of the following: financial counseling, involvement in CSR based on community needs, that is corporate social responsibility, restructuring member loans, offering digital services. We are unable to serve members due to lockdown. Kindly select one of those and let us know how you've been able to respond to members' needs during this disruption. And the options that you're meant to select from are financial counseling, involvement in corporate social responsibility based on community needs, restructuring member loans, offering digital services, or if you're unable to serve members due to lockdown. Okay, Maureen, let's have the responses. This is interesting. I can see we have 48% as the highest, restructuring member loans. That is the major response that has been provided by the SACCOs in response to the current disruption. So we are seeing the next being financial counseling at 22%. Then there is offering digital services in third place, and involvement in CSR based on community needs at 9%. And we are unable to serve members due to lockdown. So I'll go through this again. When it comes to financial counseling, we know that at this particular time, members have needs. Yeah, members have challenges during this time. Members have lost jobs. And of course, financial counseling is key at this point, because again, you need to know your member, you need to understand what the members need, and also be able to respond appropriately. A member might have been in good standing, but because of the current situation, circumstances have changed. So how, again, do you engage the member to remain relevant, or how do you become relevant to the member who is in such a state? So the next is involvement in CSR based on community needs. This too is a very good response, considering that SACCOs exist primarily to meet member needs. And of course, you don't forget about the cooperative principles, the 7th, that says concern for community. There is need for us to actually respond to the community needs where we are best. And restructuring member loans, it's important at this point. I know Jim, in his presentation, he mentioned and showed us what strategies they've undertaken in terms of engaging the members in this aspect. And this is one of the key strategies that has been adopted by most of the credit unions, considering that the members' revenues are low at this particular point. And also offering digital services. This too has been one of the key service that has been advocated by the governments in terms of responding to adhering to the health guidelines that have been put in place to avoid physical contacts. And seeing the 4% who are unable to serve members due to lockdown, this is absurd. We are having more and more institutions advocating through their national associations in touch with the regulatory offices to ensure that SACCOs are considered as essential services. So having 4%, that is absurd that we still have SACCOs that are not able to operate in this particular time when the members actually need their services. So the issue in question here would be, to how then does this SACCO survive in the long run? The future is threatened if at all the SACCOs are locked down. There should be heightened advocacy to ensure that SACCOs are recognized as essential services. Jim, do you have any comments on the results that we have in this poll?
I think on the first poll, you were spot on. Annual general meetings are tremendous opportunities for us to gather our members together to have conversation about what's going on, but it may be far too late to be able to obtain the information. So I think the more that we can go out proactively to members, perhaps to solicit their input on what's going on through SMS messages or through member experience surveys, is much more proactive and helpful in the here and now, and hopefully makes the annual general meeting perhaps less contentious, because members will be that much more happy with what their SACCO has benefited, how SACCO has benefited them, rather than coming to the AGM to perhaps complain about what the SACCO did not do. And so I very much support your comments on that. It's very exciting to hear about the high percentage, 48% yes, on the restructuring of member loans. And want to reemphasize there's a number of different ways that you can go about restructuring member loans. I mentioned the interest-only payment as one option. It's also important to evaluate those decisions against members' ability to pay. So that's a really beneficial thing to do for members, and we want to do it to make in a way that we make sure that actually will benefit the member, not only now, but what I'd like to encourage or suggest is that financial counseling percentage be a little higher and balance out with the restructuring of member loans, so the education is coming along with the restructuring of the loans that will benefit both the credit union and the member.
Okay, Jim, we also have some questions that have come in, and I'll request Grace to read them for us kindly.
Okay, thanks, Jim, for that wonderful presentation. This first question is from Judith. Judith is from Cameroon, and she asks, can different interest rate charging not attract great criticism in the credit union? I believe this is in response to some of the initiatives that you're making around reducing interest rates for good payers.
Yes, so that was one of the loan programs that I referred to called LIFT, Lower Interest for Timely Payments. So whatever the interest rate is to start out with, we automatically decrease that interest rate if a member has made payments on time each month for a full year. And we will do up to 3 reductions, so up to 3 years. Of course, that's relative to ultimately the term of the loan. If the loan term is only 3 years or 36 months, we might only decrease the interest rate after year 1. We have some rather lengthy loan terms, even for car loans of 72 or 84 months, and so you would have to adjust the number of times you would decrease an interest rate relative to the maximum ultimate maturity of that loan. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Jim. The next is from Veko of Botswana. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that well. The question states, do the regulators have the space to think outside the box during disruptions and assist SACCOs instead of sticking to the rule?
Okay, so I'll repeat back the question and let me know if I got this correct, Grace. So what flexibility do we have to think outside of the box when going through disruption, or do we have to stick to the rules? Was that the question?
Yes, Jim, but specifically to the regulators, he wanted to know if the regulators have room, to think outside the box.
Yes, so that's a very, very good question, and let me tell you what we hear and what we believe that we will experience. And what we have experienced in the past. So what our regulator has told us several times, actually since March, is that they understand the needs for credit unions to benefit their members and have encouraged us to make those adjustments as much as we can to achieve those benefits. Now, they also say in those same communications to us to ensure that the credit union is doing that in a safe and sound manner, but that they will not be overly critical as long as ultimately we are helping the members out. From past disruptions like the Great Recession as recently as 2008 to 2012, we heard a similar message, and sometimes we say that the regulators might have short-term memories. They will tell us and encourage us to do one thing, and then a couple of years from now, if things don't turn out so well, they might be critical. We've had that very open dialogue with our regulators as well, and I believe that they will not be overly critical. We just had an examination at our credit union 2 weeks ago, and in the dialogue with the examiners that came to visit, they very much acknowledged that what we were doing was to help our members, and that while some of the things may not be the norm normally happen during good times. They understand the COVID situation is different. They have not told us that we can totally disregard safety and soundness. So, and some of that is established by law. So if our capital were, as an example, to decrease significantly to be half of what it is today, we would have to establish very definitive plans as to how to restore that capital, and we would come under regulator scrutiny for that. So we still have to monitor our financial ratios and our financial stability of the credit union, but there is more flexibility in how we can respond to the immediate needs that our members are incurring right now. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, this is from Sally. Sally is from Kenya, and she has a couple of questions. First of all, she appreciates you, Jim, for the presentation. So her first question, kindly shed some light on how the insurance interventions work, i.e. on deposit insurance. This isn't a common practice locally.
So the share insurance so nationally we have what's called the National Credit Union Share Insurance Fund. Credit unions pay into that fund every year, and if a credit union were to fail, if a credit union were no longer to survive, that share insurance fund would pay our members here in the United States up to $250,000 per member, per primary member for their deposits. So when we go through a crisis, one of the things we remind people of is that their deposits are insured at the federal level, and we do that so that there's not a run on the credit union, so that we don't have people taking out large amounts of money, cash withdrawals. It's not very safe for people to be taking that cash home and hiding it, or to be walking around the streets with large amounts of cash. So we try and, or we do use communication to share with people that their deposits are insured. And just generally, even if that share insurance does not exist, I think the fundamental principle that it is not safe to be wandering around with large amounts of cash or more cash in your pockets than you need is another piece of communication that you could share with your members, even if the share insurance does not exist. Help reassure your members that their money is safe at the SACCO, and that it will be there if they need some next week or next month, and it's a better place to keep their money safe in the SACCO and not withdraw the money until such time as they need to.
Okay, thanks, Jim. The second one is on loan restructures. And she asks, in Kenya today, the loan restructures are capped at 3 months. Okay, so she wants to understand the experience in your country, because in Kenya, the loan restructures have been capped for 3 months. So what is your experience in the US?
Yes, sure. So, and this ties well with the other question from Botswana. So prior to COVID, we had programs called skip payment programs, which allowed members to skip a payment for a given month. And the way that skip payment program worked is that you could not skip payments in consecutive months, and you could only skip up to 3 payments per year. So maximum of 3 payments per year, and you could not skip in consecutive months. With the COVID-19 situation, what our regulator has given us the flexibility to do, and this is true for all types of financial institutions, is to do loan restructuring for up to 6 months. we have approached that by suggesting or having a conversation with the member initially about doing an interest-only payment. So if you look at how much of a payment is interest and how much is principal each month, then we say just pay the interest portion. That benefits you because it reduces your payments, and it also benefits the credit union because it's making, the credit union is so making interest income. And we've allowed people to do the interest-only payments for 3 months, and then to do payment deferrals for up to 3 months. So a total of 6 months altogether. We have also suspended our skip payment program. The reason we did that was that we did not want to layer one type of relief measure upon another. That does not benefit the credit union, nor does it benefit the member. So today, in the current environment and through the end of this year, our regulators have said we can do up to 6 months of either interest-only payments or payment deferrals. And that's the approach the Peninsula has taken, is 3 plus 3, 3 months plus 3 months. You could, as a credit union, do 3 or 6 months of loan payment deferrals or 6 months of interest-only payments. So there's a variety of ways that you can, combinations that you can make, but we've gone from 3 months to 6 months during the COVID crisis. And that's an example of, I think it was Victor's question from Botswana, of some of the flexibility that has been afforded to us by the regulator during this time.
Okay, so this is Mary from Kenya. She asks, are there any changes in taxation in your country? If any, I believe this is in reference to some countries today who have decided to reduce the taxation to lessen the burden, especially due to loss of jobs and such like things. And she also asks if there are arrangements for loan write-off, especially if there are large amounts.
Could you repeat the first part of the question, please?
Okay, so the question is, are there any changes in taxation in your country? And I could give an example. Today we have countries that have reduced the percentage of tax on income to create some relief, some sort of relief from for credit union members who are actually salary based.
Okay. There have not been any changes in taxation that I'm aware of. We have had many other measures that both the United States Congress, as well as locally at our state level, have taken place. So one of those measures has been a moratorium on foreclosures for mortgage loans, home loans, as well as a moratorium on evictions for renters. So if somebody is renting and unable to make their rent payments for a period of time, which I think was just extended here in our state, that renter would not be able to be evicted by the landlord. So those are in place. We've also had what's called economic impact payments or economic stimulus payments made by the government to citizens. It's at a declining rate of payments based on their income level. So if you make over a certain amount of income in your household, you would not receive any payment. For unemployment, which ties into part of that question as well, in addition to whatever our unemployment works both at the state and the federal level, state and national level. So the federal level has increased $600 per month for unemployment on top of whatever the state level unemployment rate would normally be. That has benefited people greatly. That benefit, I believe, believe has one more month before it expires, the additional $600, so it's a limited time. And then there have been programs initiated to help support small businesses. So small businesses have been able to take out loans to help pay for the salaries of their employees. The challenge has become that the additional economic impact payments to individuals and the additional unemployment benefit sometimes has created the situation where that individual is now making more money as an unemployed person as they were when they were actually working for a small business. And so then small businesses have chosen not to take out the zero interest rate loan that the government has offered because it would not, they weren't able to get their employee to come back to work because they were making more as an unemployed individual. So there have been different, I guess that is all to say that there have been many different programs and tactics used to try and support the economy. As far as the second part of the question with loan write-offs, all of our rules are the same. None of them have changed. However, one of the points that I made during the presentation was the importance and what we emphasized since day one of members talking to us, particularly if they were in a situation where they might not be able to make their loan payments. We are much better able to help members if we can talk to them sooner than later. Sometimes it can be quite embarrassing for people to come and talk to us. They might have great reservations because it might look like that we might frown upon them or look down on them. We need to communicate that that is not at all the case. We want to understand our members' needs and help them as best we are able to. And the sooner that they let us know that there's a challenge in their financial life, the sooner we're able to do that and to utilize some of the loan restructuring options that we've already talked about. So we strongly encourage people to talk to us sooner than later. So far, we at Peninsula have not seen an increase in delinquencies. Some credit unions are beginning to see that. I personally don't believe that we will begin to get a true picture until some of these government programs have stopped and the additional benefits, or maybe they might be reinstituted. But at this point, so far, we've not seen a large amount of increase in delinquencies or charge-offs based on COVID so far. We hope that will remain to be the case.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for those comments. I just want to ask one last question. I know we have lots of comments that have come in, thanking you for the good presentation that has been done. And I just want to read out one last question from Ture that says, what implication will it have on the credit union to open their common bond? I believe maybe it's a closed-in SACCO and they want to open the common bond at this particular time. So he wants to know what implication this will have in your view. What do you think the implication of this will be to the credit union?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think a very positive pursuit with the following caveat. And let me use Peninsula Credit Union as a really good example. Our common bond was open from being we were only supported mill workers, pulp and paper mill workers, until the middle of the 1950s. Since that time, we have been a community-based credit union. From 1950s to the late 1990s, that was one county. Now we have 5 counties that make up our field of membership. If you open up a common bond to to the community or to a larger group of people, one of the things you must do is identify who your target audience is. Who is it within that community that you're aiming to serve? Perhaps it's students, or perhaps it's women, or perhaps it's families that have a certain composition or makeup. In our case, excuse me, when I was talking about Peninsula Credit Union, the people that we have as our target audience are individuals and households that are living at or around a household survival budget. We are not our target audience is not those that are living in poverty, but certainly the education and the tools that we provide to people can help individuals that are living in poverty begin to become financially more stable. Our target audience is also not wealthy individuals. We do not have individuals that are making lots and lots of money. But certainly we do have services and products that support those individuals. We have investment advisors, as an example, that work for us. So we can serve everybody from poverty to wealthy, but our target audience, that niche, is developing products and services around individuals and households that live at or around a household survival budget. We have an acronym that we use for that called ALICE, ALICE, which stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. So people that are working, they have a job or are making some money, they do not have very much in assets. They may not own their own home, they may not own their own car, they don't own very much. They're income constrained. So the money that they're making from their job is just barely enough to get by. And ALICE is our target audience. And we refer to ALICE internally. We do not refer to ALICE externally. What our members and our communities see externally are the products and services that help positively encourage ALICE, that incentivize ALICE to pay money, or to save money, that provide incentives for ALICE to make loan payments on time, like the LIFT loan. So that's what people see externally, are the products and services in our communication and education and teaching financial literacy classes, financial education courses. And internally, we use ALICE as a filter to make decisions about what new products and services we want to offer and how we want to offer them. So opening up the common bond can be very helpful. It can also be dangerous if you have not identified what your focus is within that common bond.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for those responses. And as we come to the end of this webinar, I would like to thank you so much, Jim, for sharing with us your experiences. And of course, we believe that you will be able to emulate the lessons and carry them forward to improving our credit unions. And quite a number of things stood out for me in this presentation that you made this afternoon or morning on your side. And I want to just highlight and perhaps ask the members if some of these are things they're doing in their own respective credit unions. Remember, in one of your initial slides, you kind of reminded us of the cooperative principles, and what stood out, of course, is the last cooperative principle, concern for community. I like the fact that the Peninsula Credit Union has a mission that speaks to community development and recognizing the commitment to address the community development. I think that is a key goal for SACCOs, because as SACCOs, we come together to address social goals that we have as members. So that stood out for me, and I just want to challenge the credit unions that are on this webinar this afternoon or this evening to just reflect on this, and perhaps let's adopt some of these principles in order to be able to meet our member needs. Because remember, most of our members are from our community. So it's important for us to actually have a mission that speaks to addressing those key challenges that they face. And looking at the benefits. Yeah, I like the fact that you spoke to the triple bottom line benefits. That is the member, you're able to meet the member financial needs. And of course, this benefits the communities in terms of spurring the economic development in the area. And of course, it also benefits the credit union because again, the credit union serves the member and the member in a way there is a small benefit that comes to the credit union out of having these members engaged effectively. So the other thing that stood out for me is know your member. It's important for you to know your member so that you're able to serve them better. You're able to meet their needs, their core needs that they want. And of course, this calls for collection of data on a number of aspects in terms of what the member needs, what maybe is not meeting their needs. You get to know who they are and what they do. So this information is important and it helps to make decisions that are based on factual data that you have about the member that you're serving. And this information, once you know it, you had a question, how do you use the data that you know? Of course, as a credit union, what stood out for me, of course, we had all those many steps and, you know, you have to be proactive, welcome the member, but you have to be relevant to the member because at the end of the day, we are here to serve our members. And we also mentioned some responses from the credit union. Yeah, how can we respond to the needs that are out there right now as credit union? Strategy and see how then do we run the institution, considering that we had these projections, but now we are undercasting, we are reducing interest, for instance. So those are things that lessons that stood out for me, and I believe that if we know our members, then we will be able to know the impact the disruption has had on them, and this will help us respond to their needs more effectively. With those few remarks, I would like to thank all of you for attending this webinar. And from the Secretariat team, I want to say thank you again, Jim, for sparing time to be with us this evening. And I would like to remind us to look out for the next webinar that we're having on the 7th of July, that will be facilitated by Chad and Brandy from the USA, and it will be focusing on what is your legacy, how young adults can ensure the future of your SACCO. We know the issue of youth inclusion in the SACCOs is of question, especially, I guess, world over, not only Africa. But in the next webinar, we'll be able to look at the issues of the youth. With that, I would like to say it's a good evening from the ACCOSCA Secretariat, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah.